February 12th of 2023, I made up my mind to build my dream Evo. This is gonna be the Evo that is fully restored and built perfectly exactly how I want an Evo, and I'll keep it forever. Now 10 months later to the day, November 12th of 2023, I pulled this Evo into the shop, tore this thing all the way down to a bare shell, and did a complete restoration. I'm trying to build the world's nicest Evo. As always, with every project in the world, things escalated a little bit more than I had originally anticipated. When I initially built the car, I installed a Haltech Elite 2500 ECU, thinking I wouldn't go super crazy with the build. Now just a few days ago, we upgraded to a sequential transmission. One of the advantages of a sequential transmission is you can shift the transmission without using the clutch, provided you have a strain gauge. Now I have a strain gauge, but I cannot put it on the car because our ECU is completely tapped out. We have no more inputs to wire in the strain gauge to the ECU to give us that insane experience of clutchless shifting with the sequential. Now there are a few different ways we can go about fixing this issue. Option number one, ditch something else on the car that we have currently wired in to open up a port on the ECU so we can wire in the strain gauge. We could ditch something like the cruise control or the rolling anti-lag or any of those other functions that I really want on the car. I don't want to do that. Second option, add an IO expander. IO stands for input, output, and it's a piggyback off of our current ECU to give us more inputs. So we could go down that path. Or the third option, and in my opinion the best option, is go ahead and just upgrade the ECU. That is what we're doing. The final upgrade on the Evo 8, we are going from a Haltech Elite 2500, which is a nice plug and play setup for an Evo 8, very, very simple to install. And we are going all the way up to one of Haltech's most elite ECUs. This, my friends, is the new Nexus R3. Now this is more than just an ECU. This is actually considered a VCU, a vehicle control unit. Now this one isn't quite as simple as the Elite 2500, which you can buy the plug and play adapter for. With this, we are gonna go ahead and build a whole new entire engine wiring harness for the car. Now there's a lot of reasons and a lot of thought process that went into this. And one of the top reasons as to why I decided to just go ahead and build a whole new engine wiring harness is because we have changed so much stuff from the factory. In addition to a ton of factory sensors, coils, injectors, all that good stuff, we have added in coolant pressure, oil pressure, fuel pressure, flex fuel, removed the OEM drive-by cable throttle body, added in drive-by wire, added in a new fan, added in a second fuel pump, cruise control, rolling anti-lag, rotational idle, and now a strain gauge. As you can see, guys, there's a ton of stuff we've added in to the factory harness. And after a while, it just starts to get messy when you're trying to add in that much stuff into an OEM harness. Not to mention, I'm pretty sure we are having a slight issue with the OEM harness. The home and trigger wires need to be shielded from the rest of the harness. Otherwise, you're gonna have ignition errors and issues, which this car intermittently has. Randomly, the car will just cut out, stop running, throw a code for the ignition error, and all of that will also be resolved by building an entire harness from scratch. This here is the entire wiring harness. This side plugs in to the ECU right over here. And all of these open wires we need to pin to specific connectors, which we have over here. Coils, injectors, all the sensors, some wiring loom, and the wideband that goes along with the Nexus R3. First order of business, remove the factory engine harness and the current ECU that's in the car. The current ECU is now removed, so that is the ECU, the Elite 2500. That is the WB1, which is the wideband setup for that ECU. And then the plug and play adapter, so the Evo 8 OEM engine harness plugs in right there. A setup like this works great if you keep it fairly simple and don't add in too many things. But when you start adding in a billion different things, then your wiring starts to just get messy. This here is the entire OEM harness that we need to completely rebuild out of all of this. Before we start rebuilding the engine harness, there's one thing that we need out of this harness. Integrated with the engine harness is also the wiring for the ABS pump. Now we could delete ABS on the car. I don't want to do that. I prefer this thing to have ABS. So all we really need to do is just pull out the ABS section out of this harness, go ahead and loom it up, get that back on the car, and then we can build the new engine harness. This mess right here is the engine control side of things. This right here is everything that we needed out of the OEM harness. So we have that factory relay box, and this harness controls air conditioning, the starter circuit, alternator, ABS, the wiper motor. We will need an input and an output for the air conditioning out of the Nexus, but that is super easy. Input is from the air pressure switch. Output goes to the air compressor relay. The first thing that we need to focus on is getting this ECU mounted in the car. I'm gonna mount it in the same spot that the Elite 2500 was in. Let's go ahead and build a little mounting plate out of this aluminum here and get her secured. Our very simple ECU mount is complete and it fits right behind the glove box. We are now ready to move on to wiring up the engine control side of things. This is going to be a ton of work. Went ahead and pulled off a few things to have easier access to all the sensors on the back of the motor. And then I also went ahead and allocated all of the wires. So if we pull up the IO report here, you can see every sensor, all of the fun stuff I want to have: rolling anti-lag, AC, cruise control, rotational idle. All of these wires that you guys see here on this harness are fully allocated exactly to the sensors and the switches that they need to run to. A bunch of hours later, everything is routed exactly where it's going to sit. From here, we're going to go ahead, pull the harness off, loom it, install the connectors, get the harness back on the car, and then we can move on to everything inside. All of the breakaways off the main harness are loomed. Now we just need to loom from here to here, heat shrink the whole thing, add the connectors, and the engine side will be 100% finished up. This here is the wiring for the injector side. I really like the loom that we're using. I got it from Ohm Racing. On the other Nexus harness that I built for the Type R, the black Type R, I used all DR25, which is rated better, but this looks way cleaner than the DR25. I just wrapped up the last connector for the whole entire engine harness. Now we do have a ways to go for inside the cabin, but from the boot on is all complete. And man, this thing turned out absolutely beautiful. So here's all the injectors. This would be flex fuel. These two that are not pinned or plugged, those are for air conditioning. I'm still undecided where I'm gonna put that connector. Transmission temp, EBCS, ground for the coils, coolant pressure, intake air temp, throttle body, coil, vehicle speed, coolant temp, oil pressure, fuel pressure, coil, crank, and the wideband. Now there are 2 boots I need to add on, one right there and one right there. I put them on earlier, but I made a mistake in the harness, so I had to cut them back off. And of course, now I don't have the proper size heat shrink, but we can put those on later, no big deal. Let's get this harness back on the car, get it all plugged in, and see how good it looks. To completely connect everything, I do need to put the intake manifold back on for all the injectors and the map sensor. But this is exactly what I was after. I added the harness, can't really tell. The whole thing is going to be tucked underneath the intake manifold, run down along top of the transmission, which will also be hidden by the intercooler piping, which greatly cleans up the engine bay. Now for the next hard part, all of the wiring for the cabin. This is gonna probably take a whole nother day, as we have the throttle pedal, the strain gauge, cruise control, rolling anti-lag, rotational idle, both fuel pumps, power and ground for the ECU, trigger for the ECU. I think that's about it. Let's get started. I went ahead and built 2 separate sub harnesses. There's one more thing I need to go ahead and build before we get this car 100% put back together, and that is a plate for the firewall. The shop is an entire mess, but the car is back enough together to hopefully run. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and plug in the laptop to the Nexus ECU, load up the base map, and go ahead and attempt the first start. Up first, let's make sure we actually get power. Alrighty, we should be good. I have spent the last 3 hours trying to get this thing to fire, and she will not fire. It'll crank just fine. Everything on the dashboard seems fine. There's no issues, no errors whatsoever, but my brain is turning to mush. Sometimes you just need to take a break. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and diagnose this thing how I know how to diagnose cars, whether or not it has a nice ECU, and it probably tells you somewhere in the ECU what's wrong. Either A, I wired something wrong, or B, there's a setting in the ECU that is improper. There are multiple settings that are pretty confusing. You need to actually tell the Nexus to send power to the coils, to send power to the injectors, so on and so forth. But let's backtrack. I'm just gonna verify we have fuel. I'm gonna verify we have spark. I know we have compression because the car ran with the old harness. I'm assuming it's either gonna be a spark or a fuel issue. Let's verify. All right, we narrowed it down quite a bit. The car's not getting spark. So either A, a setting in the ECU is wrong, which I'm pretty confident it's all good. It's saying that they should be sparking. They're pulsing in the ECU. According to the ECU, there's power going to the coils. So my assumption is I'm guessing I wired the crank sensor wrong. Now the wiring on the crank sensor for this is a little bit tricky because it's not an OEM setup. It's a Kegley 12-1 setup, not factory whatsoever. I'm guessing I made an error there. Unfortunately, to get to the crank sensor, I do have to pull the manifold back off. I did just verify something in the ECU. We're getting RPM. RPM comes off of the crank sensor, so that's probably not the issue. Finally got it figured out. The wiring going to the coil packs was flipped. Now she's alive and we can start getting everything buttoned back up, and most importantly, get our strain gauge in so we can go for a rip and not use the clutch while shifting. It's now 4 hours later. As you can see, the car is still completely torn apart, and that is because it is not charging. Our alternator is not charging. It's down to like 10.9 volts. And we've checked everything as far as wiring goes. All the wiring is good. It appears somehow the second I unplugged the Elite and put in the Nexus without changing anything else, the alternator went bad. Seems highly unlikely, but I'm gonna put a new alternator in it tomorrow, and hopefully that fixes the issue. All right, guys, new alternator is on the car, and you can probably tell by my smile, but the new alternator fixed the issue. Look at that, man. Top right corner, 13.9 volts, right around 14 volts before it was like 10.9, 11.2. It's never the case where, it's never happened before, where I change something else goes bad, and that part that was supposedly bad, it's actually bad. It's always like, okay, I changed the ECU, clearly I messed up the wiring going to the alternator. That wasn't the case. The alternator went bad the very second that we changed the ECU. That doesn't make any sense at all to me, but clearly that was the case because she is alive and running well. So now that we verified starter control works, alternator's good, the ABS is working, the wiper motor's working, and the AC is working, the secondary harness that is currently a mess that I had to pull out of the OEM engine harness, we can now get that loomed up as well, and this thing will be ready for final assembly. So I just got the strain gauge installed. This thing is still kind of a mess on the interior side of wiring, and you guys probably saw I did run out of loom for that sub harness for the ABS and all that. So I'm waiting on loom to come in for that, and then we can get that harness finished up. But before we get everything cleaned up and tied where it needs to sit, we need to go do some testing. Test to make sure everything works on the car, specifically our new strain gauge. Now, I'm definitely not the smartest when it comes to setting things like this up, but I set it up how I thought it should be set up. It's calibrated, pulling down for shifting up and pushing forward for shifting down. Let's go test it and see if I did it right. So if I'm remembering correctly, I have to let my hand off the shifter all the way every time in between shifts because it needs to kind of reset and go back to that 2.5 volts, which is center line. When you push forward to shift down a gear, it detects voltage there, and then of course pulling back it detects voltage there. So I need to let off every single time. I'm gonna do some testing, not full rip, and see how it goes. No foot on the pedal, dude. It works. It freaking works. That is so cool. All right, let's do a rip. Full on Rimsky, boys. Hold on for dear life. We're going for a ride. That is so sick, dude. Well guys, we have successfully did it. The whole car is now set up on the Nexus R3. Everything in the engine harness works exactly as it should. The strain gauge works exactly as it should. Finally got the alternator issue fixed, and this thing is sitting almost exactly how I want it. There's a few more little changes I'm gonna make to make it just a little bit better, a little bit easier to monitor some of the gauges and whatnot. But for the most part, my dream Evo 8 is nearly complete. That was a long 4 days of work. Took me roughly 40 hours to complete everything that we just got done in this video, but we took care of so many issues with the new setup that I could not be more excited.